when you were in the military, you had a lot of structure, right? So what happens when you actually start going into the civilian life and there's less structure?
First thing for me was probably a feeling. Fear is probably the wrong description, but am I doing this right? Am I screwing something up? Not only was I in that environment of military, but I was also in an electronics trade. So it was super binary. Everything was ones and zeros, math, right or wrong. There was little room for subjectivity. And my career path was well established. I had intended to do a full 25 years in the military. Well, full, meaning I'd be pensionable, meaning I'd be kind of at the point where I'd still be young enough that I could then go do something else and have a pension to supplement my income, or just continue on. So leaving that structured environment came with some fear, because I didn't know what I wanted to do initially. All I knew is that it was time for a change in terms of creativity, subjectivity, artistic ability. I had to explore it. It was like a compulsion.
Well, because how many years were you in the military?
18.
18?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were always, because you're an AME, is that correct? Or am I getting that wrong?
Close enough, yeah. So we call it avionics technician. And then when you achieve a certain rank level, you become a air maintenance superintendent, which is a combination of all our trades, kind of management. And so I came from an electronics background. It'd be similar to a civilian AME with the S specialty, but I wasn't trained in like engines and things like that.
And so were you deployed at all, or?
Yeah, in 2008, I did a few domestic operations as well, but the primary one I would talk about would be in 2008 for International Security Assistance Force. We were in Afghanistan.
Yeah. And so how long were you out there for?
I did a couple rotos of, they were planned to be 56-day rotos. We tended to get extended. So all in all, I did around 7 months.
What's it like being in, because that was an active war zone at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that experience like?
Different for me, being somebody who is in support of the aircraft. So we were the tactical airlift unit. However, we're still somewhat protected behind the wire in terms of we were in the Kandahar airfield. And so we're not out at the, kicking doors and the guys who are really front line. They're out at the forward operating bases, which we would resupply. But generally speaking, our air assets were kept inside the wire. So it's very rugged. It's very, it's a different world altogether. But other than, the rocket attacks and things like that, we're fortunate enough to have a safety net compared to those outside the wire.
Yeah. Because you were married at the time?
No.
No? No. Okay. So when you got married when you got back?
No, actually several years later.
Okay.
I think of it. Yeah.
Okay. So were you with anybody at the time, or were you just a youngster?
No, I was a single guy at the time, had a few long-term relationships, but by that point, I was single when I was over there.
Yeah. Okay. So then you got back, and how does life change when you go from an active military zone to less military, but still military?
I think I'm still figuring that out, to be honest. Yeah. It's, your question almost caught me off guard, because I think a lot of the changes in my future came from that change in tempo. You get accustomed to one speed. You get accustomed to kind of always operating on one level with one central theme. And then you come back and things change entirely. So I would say the change is there's always a lot going on. There's always a lot of mission critical things, but the day-to-day feels perhaps a little less urgent.
You mentioned mission critical, which is like military 101, right? It's like you have this one objective, or, there's always like a primary, right? When you go out of the military and you have to make your own critical mission, what is that like? Confusing.
For me, I didn't leave the military at a time that I had intended. It came in, some medical health stuff came into play. And like I said before, it was my intention to remain longer. So I hadn't set myself up. The kind of the classic is almost get your pension. And then a lot of guys will either go into something related If you're a pilot, perhaps you go to look to fly to Air Canada. If you're on the AME side, like myself, perhaps you look to get either a contractor job or maintaining the planes in the second line or third line maintenance role or a training role. I hadn't set up for that. And at the time I left, it was like anything but aviation. I needed a full switch off from that. So I wasn't ready.
What was the primary kind of break point for you there? You mind talking about that?
Not at all. Yeah. It's, the realization that I wasn't sure that I was as safe as I needed to be, in terms of, I caught myself making big mistakes that I wouldn't have made prior. Things like, what it came down to is, I was in charge of a maintenance desk. First line technicians are all working in the same constant battle. It's always busy. And, I sent a bunch of guys out to fuel an aircraft. This is very run of the mill. And as they were getting out there to start fueling, I realized I'd sent them to the wrong aircraft. That was not the plane that we were intending to fly the next day or later that day, whatever the case was. And that was a bit of a, that's weird. And I was aware that I had a baseline level of stress that was never really going away. And just that feeling like I'm fighting the shakes, like I'm just anxious to a level that it's impeding me physically.
Do you think that was from your time out in Kandahar, or do you think it was something that just grows when you're in a kind of military system?
I think it's accumulative. I think anything that you've been through in your life, whether it be a personal trauma or a lived trauma or an exposure to danger, I believe that accumulates and can all have a factor. But what's interesting is the way it hits different people, or what demons you may already have going into those situations and how they're going to play with what you've experienced. I think for me, it has a lot to do with rectifying the things that you've seen when things slow down. Yeah. When you're go, go, go all the time, it's easy to not think about what you've been through.
Yep. I always find I'm really good in moments of high stress. But in the moments of low stress, I actually find I tend to seek. Like, I try to find things that are wrong to fix them, right? So is that very similar to you? You find that your mindset goes to, like, there must be something to be fixed here. Or, like, I need to be doing something.
It took a long time to think I needed to be fixed because I think I just lacked the self-awareness.
Yeah.
But I knew that I felt not right. Something was off.
Was there a crescendo point?
Yeah. I got posted to Ottawa, and my wife had a really good job here. She was in Belleville at the time. And for a variety of reasons, it didn't make sense for us to move the family. So I was able to get approved to essentially have an apartment up there. And I was just coming back and forth weekend to weekend. But I was no longer in an active air environment, whether it be training, whether it be active flying, and everything just slowed down. And I filled my time in the first couple of years. I referee hockey in my spare time, and I was filling my nights, sometimes coming home from work, sleeping for 3-4 hours, reffing hockey for 4 or 5 hours, coming home at 1 a.m., sleeping for another 4 and going back to work. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, oh, this is a lot. Maybe I'm going to do a little less hockey for a while. And then it was like, I don't feel good. And I didn't even realize it. And in hindsight, it's still hard to rectify in my mind whether or not that was an active choice or that was just my habit, was to fill my time and be busy all the time. Then when things finally slowed down because my body said enough, my mind said enough too. And I just remember staring blankly for long periods of time and time passing and me not being aware how long had passed, and just revisiting. The brain wants to rectify. It's kind of like that concept of when you go to sleep and what your brain does and how your memories are, it's almost like
regurgitated to you, right?
Yeah, sorting a hard drive out and making things make sense and optimizing. And I think when it came for that time for that to happen, I realized things were wrong.
Yeah. I find, and especially in times of anxiety, because it sounds like to me that's a very anxiety-ridden moment, right? Often my fix for anxiety is to do something. So, write it all down and then basically go out and do something based on that. But what I'm hearing here too is really curious because you could actually be filling that time with stuff that's not actually helping the anxiety. It's just kind of like tamping it down, right? And then physically, after a while, your body just has enough, right? Everyone thinks of anxiety as like this mental thing when it's actually more often than not presents itself in a physical manner. And that's when people start paying attention to it at that point.
Definitely. Do you know your own warning signs? When you say, when I'm starting to feel anxious, how do you know what that is?
I'm trying to figure them out because I know when I've gone too far. I know when I've gone too far when I can't stand still. Like I'll just be like, I need to be doing something. I got to be doing this and doing that. And more often than not, I try to fill that time with work, right? And so when we're building the studio, actually, you got to see me in like a very high anxiety moment of my life where we're building this studio and everything was going downhill. And I was like trying to hold like a really heavy sled going downhill. And I was really worried that, the thing that we had dreamed of was quickly becoming like an albatross more than anything, And so for me, I think it's the feeling of like, it's weird. It's like vibration within the body. Mm-hmm. Like you feel like you're just buzzing. And it's just like, that's when I knew I was like, that might be a physical manifestation of anxiety at that point. And so this year has been more about kind of consistency and maintaining what we got and enjoying what we've got. And like these days are actually my off days where I actually get to like just forget about everything else and just focus in on the conversations and just relax. And that helps. Yeah. How about you?
Also still learning. So that was kind of where I was going with that when I wanted to ask you, because you said when I feel it, and I'm going, how do you know? That's for me. So same thing. And the mind, it's such a holistic thing, right? Like what's your background? What's your upbringing? What's an acceptable cultural or society reaction in a given situation? And I find, we've had these discussions about being ADHD people as well, which is something I learned later in life, but that's a whole other thing.
Now, are you diagnosed or are you self-diagnosed?
No, recently.
So you're legit yeah, because I'm still self-diagnosed.
Okay.
Only based on the fact that watching my kid and then going, that's exactly how I am. So it's like, so I just apply the rules and it works. Yeah. So I'm just like, okay, well, that works. That's good.
My younger sister struggled in school and went through the diagnosis because it was flagged. Like she could not pay attention in class. She had a lot more difficulty. Generally speaking, I could be a lazy student. If I was bored and I wasn't interested in the subject matter, I could slough it off. But I didn't seem to have the inability to participate. And when my sister was going through all the testing and the self-diagnosed or the self-assessments at home that the parents are to do, my mom was going like, this is Adam through and through. Like, what's going on here? And so I kind of became aware of it at a younger age. I was probably 12 or 15 or something. And I sort of knew, but it never seemed like something that was problematic for me. And then over time, learning, and the reason I ask is you mentioned about in a high stress situation, in an emergency, same thing. I'm great. I'm just going to focus on the facts. I'm going to, somebody passes out on the floor. I'm going to do all the things that need to happen. But then I'm driving home later and somebody cuts me off in traffic and it's the end of the world.
Yes.
I'm freaking out.
I have enough road time now that I am really, I'm really calm on the road. But we had a situation, this goes back when my daughter was younger, where she had an head injury, massive gash on her head, like bleeding everywhere. And we were 45 minutes away from the hospital. And the thing is, it's like we're down this like crazy ass road. It took like 20 minutes to get down this road because it's just all gravel road, like old mining road kind of situation. And Trish was saying at one point, she's in the back, like staunching the bleeding. And she looks up and she's going straight in the car, but the car was going sideways around the corners. And there's just this perfect drift, like just going around, just pure focus on driving as fast as physically possible to get her to the hospital. Because I knew that even if we called the ambulance, they wouldn't be able to get down there in time. And, this is like, we have to take control of it. And that was where I realized that that's when, because like Brady will attest, like holding a camera for me, I'll be like, I have a shake hand, but like there's where it's like just steady.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think brains work weird that way.
is that putting anxiety at bay, or is that
Oh,
just
100%.
survival?
Thinking about it now is actually putting the anxiety right up.
Yeah.
Like thinking back about it, like how close that was. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I find in those moments, you just do what you need to do. And I feel like at lesser moments of stress, like I was saying, like, somebody does something stupid, it might not even impact me. Just I'm observing a situation where somebody's basically not being kind to somebody else in the way that they're driving. And they're probably oblivious. They're not doing it on purpose, but it irritates me. And now I'm festering. And now I'm thinking all these things that if I just drive, that all goes away.
Yeah. But it's like, no, I'm gonna be here. Yeah. I find the anxiety is a strange one because it's unlike stress. Because stress is usually, there's like two kinds of stress. There's either the stress that you're putting on yourself or someone that's putting stress upon you, right? When anxiety can be a blend of both. Mm-hmm. It can be people adding to it or taking away from it, right? And that is because it's really tough, because anxiety will stop you from doing the things that you need to do. And it can present itself as fear. It can present itself as kind of nerves, but it's really just this I think it's just this big thing that often stops people from getting where they need to go. Right. And so when you're driving through anxiety, when you're driving through stress, what was the one thing that you found? Because you were saying like you were like comatose and like stop. So how did you push through that to get to the next layer of your life? Did you have to change everything? Did you walk me through that?
The official steps would be simplify and take one thing at a time, what you can handle. And it's about building a habit. So learning through, seeing a mental health provider, if you have a therapist, if you have a psychologist, whatever you have, they're really great at giving you those tactics. And at first I was almost resistant to that. It felt like, okay, like great tools, fine, but like what's going on? Like, why am I so screwed up? So I was looking at it the wrong way, because what I've learned now is it's about building the habit. So if I'm completely not functional in any meaningful way, if what I want to see from my own productivity and my description of my throughput is now diminished, I want to get that back up there. That's something that I was looking at, but I was being results oriented. And it became, okay, if you're stuck in bed and you feel completely unable to get up and join the world, my task for today is to brush my teeth. And that literally became it. And that was the tools and the exercises that therapy were giving me. Because it was so day to day. You go out in the world when you have to, and you put on the face, and those not close to you don't see the difference, but those living with you day to day see how messed up you really are. We all have the armor. So it was learning to build the habit. And then maybe tomorrow it's brushing my teeth and having a shower. Might even be making a meal, And then that's literally where it started. And then when I was feeling like I could do a little bit, then I would take on something a bit larger. And what's interesting is even when you're not functional, you usually still have your surge ability. So for a short time, you can be highly functional, but it's going to come at a cost if you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Do you find that, and especially the military, that felt very demoralizing, because you felt like you should be able to just like kind of charge for it. You should be able to just muscle through it and just keep going, right? Like just shake it off, keep going, rub some dirt in it, right? All the kind of classic guy things we've been taught, right? It's like, so at what point did you realize that was just not an effective tactic? Like, because you made a change, right? So like, was this the impetus of the change? Is this why you started doing, started looking at, I need to completely change? And, obviously leaving the military early was not on your books, but it had to happen for you to stay Adam.
Perhaps to be a more true Adam, I think, is even what I would call it. When you get into a habit and it becomes your identity, leaving that or departing from that, even in a small way, can feel counterintuitive. And I don't think I ever had a great deal of personal stigma around mental health. I didn't feel like, oh, why can't I just push through? There are times that absolutely I'm doing something small and I can feel that I'm really not doing well that day and I can't do the things I want to do. that it's frustrating. And you get into that negative self-talk of going, why can't I just do this? And instead of accepting, if you have a cold or if you have a broken arm, you're not going to question why you can't do those things. You know why those things are there. But there's something about that mental barrier that you don't see. And so I just said, I don't have a great deal of stigma, but there's like an inherent mode of operation that you kind of do, or at least you think along that front. So I never felt that I was letting myself down or doing the things I shouldn't be able to do, but I was aware that I was subdued and I was not at my full capacity. So what was the end of your question? What was the time I realized?
When did you realize you had to change like everything? Because we talked about this with Jackie. Remember I was talking about how like teachers have this identity around them. Like that's your identity. That's who you are. But then when you're forced to really confront that and say, this isn't who I am, or this doesn't have to be all of who I am. I can change this. Like, what does that feel like? And how did you come to that realization?
I think I didn't have a choice in the sense that I couldn't be in the environment I had been in all this time. It wasn't like I can take the uniform off and go work in aviation. I knew I needed to be fully away from that, just for health reasons. And when it came time to decide, I've always been pretty, science tech, like the STEM kind of trades oriented. I always loved physics, chemistry. You look at my YouTube feed, it used to be all outer space and now it's all cameras. I was craving something subjective, played a little music when I was younger, but just appreciating the creative flow, the chaos that comes with creativity. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. And yet I'm still fighting that. I think I've had this conversation with a few people that I always find myself in the tech-oriented roles of this career. Mm-hmm. So I'm going towards creative, but there's always going to be that tech side in the background. I seem to operate well that way, but knowing I needed to do a change it's just something that happened organically. It wasn't a decision. It was like my body just knew. I didn't have a choice.
Do you regret it?
Do I regret what? Can you be more specific?
The choice of like changing?
I didn't have a choice to remain in the military. It was a medical decision.
Okay. Well, do you miss that? Like the good times of where you were, are they overshadowed by the good times of now?
No, think about the good times you had as a child, messing around with your schoolmates and whatever. How does that equate to the joy you have with your family? It's different.
Yep.
You can't go backward. You appreciate those memories. You appreciate where you've been. I don't regret the first career, regardless of whether or not it had a cause on my health, an impact that I didn't want. But the experiences are awesome. And, those memories are always going to be there, and the things you did that were so cool and the things you got to see that were so unique and different. Yeah, no regrets there at all.
Yeah.
But changing and deciding which career, that's still in progress. I can't give you a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know when you first met me, you were into the film industry. Like that's where you wanted to go. And, and I remember looking at you, and it's funny how people, especially when they've had to deal with any kind of anxiety or anything like that, they recognize in each other very quickly. And so I remember like you connecting on that layer and being like, hey, how you doing? I remember it's like a particularly stressful moment. And you were like, how's it going? I think we were driving back from Kingston. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm trying to get through this and trying to figure it out. And, I've gone through enough now that I know how to kind of like take a step back sometimes. Right. And it's like, okay, maybe I'll push all at once today, and like just kind of slow play today. But I still remember seeing you in the creative roles going, you come alive in those creative roles because you're really good at the tech stuff. You're really good at the binary stuff, but you also have this layer of like, what if we tried this? What if we tried that? And like, I know when you're DOPing for the coffee run, for example, like seeing you and like pushing you further was kind of fun because like your first day, you're kind of like holding back a bit because you're like, I kind of want to do this, but I'm not sure. And just like, I should just listen to the director and do this. And then like, we're just like, no, double down on that. Go try go deeper into like the shake cam and do all that. And like, you just see your face like, Okay, I can give this a shot, and then you put your own flavor on it, which is really that's the mark of a good artist.
I appreciate that. And that's still a work in progress. I'm glad you brought that up because I was having trouble explaining that difference from the binary and going from the right or wrong to the more open. I'm seeking that, but we always talk about, what do you call it, like growth mindset or whatever. Pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is so important to grow as a person in any profession, but in the creative, perhaps more. And I think I still fight that. What is the correct way to do this? What is the best way to do this? So you learn camera settings,
Yep.
You learn how to record stuff, you learn what's the optimal settings for a given environment and what's the best lens and what's this and that. But then putting that all together in a package, throwing all that tech stuff away and saying, screw this, I don't need this. What do I want to make? And I still fight that.
Yeah.
So I guess it's finding your creative voice and just trusting your instincts rather than trusting something more technical.
I find art very interesting because when we first start, we start so innocent, right? We're exploring. It's curiosity. We want to know more. We want to try more. We see something that we like. We try to emulate it, right? Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. But then you get to a point where now you want, there's two layers to this. You want people to recognize it because then they recognize you and they value what you've done. So it feels like you've not done something for the sake of doing something, right? And the second is then you look for the, kind of the reassurance from your peers, right? People come to you saying, hey, how did you do this? Because then hey, I've done something right because now people are asking me how to do things. And I think like there's like layers of being an artist that a lot of people don't like to talk about, which is there's a lot of try, fail, only to get nothing. There's no applause. And a lot of people stop there, right? As they start that first pottery piece or whatever, and they get so far and then they give up. And then they never go back to it again, but they have the fond memories of that learning and that growing. And some people do this their entire lives. We're talking like, a year, and we all know someone who's done this where they spend like a year or two learning something, get okay at it, and then stop, and then go on something else, and go on something else, right? So what makes the difference between someone who artistically wants to stay in the field, like what pushes someone beyond that initial burnout of curiosity?
I think passion and I think habit. I think it could be one or the other, or it could be a combination of both. I've heard people say that success is just perseverance. Like you're not necessarily results oriented. You just love what you're doing and you'll just keep doing it regardless of whether or not you feel successful. And speaking to that point, like kind of sound like you were like circling around, like developing a style.
Yes.
What makes you unique, or what you gravitate towards that makes your art identifiable. And if people are asking you about it, there's something they're seeing in your style, an element thereof that they want to emulate or they like.
Yep.
And for me, that's still in the technical largely, I still feel very much,
Sure.
I have things that I enjoy, things I gravitate toward, but I find I'm still messing with that. I'm still messing with that look and
that's also why you
out.
talk to me about that too. In photography in particular, I noticed like where other people would be like, what kind of lens did you use? Or you'd be like, why did you put the light here? Like you're always asking those questions that went beyond just technology. You are now talking on the voice level. You're talking on the look, whatever you want to call it. That's where you were talking. You're hitting that layer, which not a lot of artists when they first get started anyways, even hit, because they're so focused on like what camera settings, what lens, what light, all of that. They never stop to ask why we use any of these things. And we have this discussion all the time in the studio. It's like, why does it matter, right? Why does that matter? Why do we bother putting this many lights up, right? You can just do it with one light. So that's the one thing I find is when, as you progress as an artist, you start to ask that question. You've developed that really young, which I think is because of your technical background. You're able to pull in that technical really quickly, right? So the technical layer is gone. So now you're into now this is the, development of the look or the voice or whatever you want it to be. And yeah, it's kind of fun watching artists grow through those layers. So the one thing I had written down a quote here, but there's a quote that I put on my treadmill, which actually is something that I think resonates really well, which is your repetitions are your reputation. And you talk about having a habit, about doing something over and over again. That's kind of what I started to instill in myself when I started running. And then that's when I actually started to become a better artist, was when I forced myself to go through the grind of doing the same thing over and over again, but getting incrementally better. And so, especially when it comes to change, like you've done that through your career, right? But now you're forcing yourself to restart, right? And you're going through it again. But I find that you're not really starting at zero. You're starting a much further point. So where young artists are coming in next to you, but you're already 10 steps ahead of them because you already have that history, even though it's not in the same field, but you have that consistency and that habit of being able to go, hey, today I get up and I fix this airplane, right? This is what I do, right? So you've developed that throughout your time. Do you think that change is inevitable? And do you think that it's something that most people have to do to see the better version of themselves?
I think changing, actually, I'd like to clarify. So seeing that change in myself, and was that inevitable, or people in general, that change is going to happen and it's inevitable, or it's not?
I think, let's talk on a personal level. Let's talk about you.
Okay.
All right.
I think it was going to happen sooner or later that I was going to figure out that I liked artistic pursuits. They were not something, I didn't have a ton of artistic people in my family. There's a bit of skill there for sure. I have some people in my family who can do some pretty neat things, but I didn't grow up, constantly playing instruments, constantly painting. It was all available to me and not discouraged, but there wasn't a lot of, everyone does this and we just all learn it. So I think discovering that you have that came naturally, and it was going to happen sooner or later. But I think having success in the right and wrong, being good at math, being good at the sciences, growing up, knowing your times tables quicker than your classmates gave you that positive feedback. And then talking about stepping outside your comfort zone, you can't be told you're wrong when you're asked what's 6 times 6. You're either you've got the answer or you don't. Not like, I like your answer, but like this guy's 36 is better over here.
This is why I disagree with grading in any art class. Yeah. There should not be any grades. It should be, you've done the art class. Because like it's just subjective at that point.
Can you do a technique? Yes or no. But after that, how you do it and how you choose to employ it or not employ it. Yeah. That's where the mold is broken.
Do you think it's like I always tell people, it's the stuff that we leave on the cutting floor that makes the difference. Right? I'm a big proponent of simplifying to a core message. I'm about really bringing it down to like a very distillable thing when we do any kind of creative endeavor. Is that something that can be done at an early age, or is that something that you need to have the experience to do?
I think it depends what you're talking about. To use an example, I've seen the photography of some people I know who are very young and they've only been picking up a camera for a couple of years. And I love something about their composition. I love something about just whatever it is that their eye sees when they take that image. So yes, I think some things are going to come quicker than others, but I don't know. I've kind of already lost track of this question here, but I'm just going down the rabbit hole of it's going to come to you at a particular rate, or you might not be interested in it at all. Like I look at some of the art I love, I'll never be able to duplicate it, replicate it, even come close to that, and I wouldn't gravitate toward it. But there's something I'm seeing that I just love, and I can't turn away. I
think it's the experience that we imbue within our art, right? And I think that as a young artist, you've got so much to learn, but you've also so much to experience. And as we get older, we tend to have this breadth of experience to pull from, right? And then it's like, I always tell people, it's like, you never hire an artist based on what they do. You hire an artist based on what they're capable of doing and what they've shown that they can do, right? And that comes from their unique angle, their unique voice, and their unique concept. But this is all from stacking those, a lifelong obsession of curiosity or eclectic behavior or whatever it is. Like that's where people start to see the art in the art form, like that to me is, I think that's the mark of artists in general. Like especially when we're looking at working with artists, for example, we don't just look at their work, we look at how they live, which is wild because like we're just basing it on that, and that's the joy of art is you've gone from like super structured to very unstructured, right? So that's a massive change. Like how do you try to put structure into your art still, or do you at this point just, just let it be this weird free form kind of ambiguous thing?
It's a daily battle, actually. I want to play in that free form. I want, like we talked about, having different techniques and how you want to employ them. I want to play more. I want to achieve a look that I like, that's so intangible and hard to describe. But I'm always kicking off that, oh shoot, I'm obsessed with my exposure right now. Whether there's just, do I like this composition? Do I like this image? Do I like this lighting? If the answer is yes, good enough. You can play with the rest, and you can go about it in there. Anytime I've shot a project, say for you guys, for example, or Brady, I'm asking, how is this? How is that? And I think I'm still hung up on those technical details rather than just being more in that moment, worrying about, do I like what I shot?
The way I got out of that, by the way, was I just set myself some very simple rules, right? So my lighting's always the same. Like I have two potential lightings. We have short lighting, or we have Rembrandt lighting. Like if you go look through my portfolio, it doesn't exist anymore, but when it existed, it was a mixture of those two. So I have a short lighting, which would be, I don't know what you guys call it in film. Like it's like backlighting or whatever. And then like Rembrandt lighting is like your classic 45 with a
Those
loop
are
on
basically the same thing.
Are they the same thing? Okay. But yeah, those are the two things I said, these are my two lighting techniques. And then I put a frame around it, and like, that's where I want to be. So now I had to question. So I started looking at going, well, I photograph people, right? So how do people want to feel? Well, often the people that I was photographing were leaders, they were business owners, and a lot of these people like to feel larger than life. And so, yes, I'm short, and so it naturally leaned into it, but I always like to have a slight upward angle, right? So, and that was the one thing that became the defining point. It was like you'd see, slight upward angle, and they call it the hero pose or whatever. And then I became really well known for the hero look for, brands and for clients. And that was like my little structure. And then I could play within it however I wanted. It just came down to colors, lighting, all the other stuff that I can add into it at that point. But that was like my constants, that kind of the structure. So
how'd you find those constants? Is that I like this, or I've seen it elsewhere and it works?
Yep. I spent a lot of time understanding what I liked, and I spent a lot of time looking at other people's work and going, what's drawn me to it, right? So then from when I had that kind of, these are the things I like, then I took the things that I absolutely had to have, and so narrowed it down to like a list of 3 things. And then from there, every time we're shooting, because then if a client interrupted the way that I did the shooting, the work suffered. And I started getting a bit more kind of consistent with my clients saying, listen, I know you don't like pre-production, but we need to do this, because if I get into this location and I can't put a light here, I can't do this, or more often than not, the space is too big to light, so how does it look then? And back then I was using a medium format, so it's not like I had a lot of options. It was a slow camera. Like we had one shoot where they sent me out on a boat to photograph like a race, like a rowing race, but they couldn't get me close to the race. And I was shooting on a 50 mil. So my entire shots are like wide, because I had no telephoto. And they're like complaining. They were like, well, we sent you out to take photos. And I'm like, yeah, but you sent me out on a boat that couldn't get any closer. And you didn't tell me that I needed to be shooting on a 300 mil lens.
You wanted a sports event.
Yeah, you wanted a sports event photographer, and you took a hero. Yeah. So like, it was outside of my box. It was super uncomfortable for me, because like I'm sitting on this boat knowing that I'm not going to be able to achieve what they want. And I'm like trying to radio them like, hey, is there any way at the end of the race we can get this little tugboat, like it's literally like a little kind of like motorboat, get it in close so I can just photograph them at the end? Because then at least I can get the hero shots that you want. Right? We had some killer hero shots from the shore, but as soon as I stepped onto the boat, it was done. Right? And so but they were like, no, we just want we want coverage. And I was like, well, I don't do that. That's not me. Because like I built my box. And so anytime a client asked for me to step outside of that box, I would feel like the anxiety, I'd feel the stress. And I think that's the one part that I don't miss about photography, is stepping into a situation where I know I can't be successful because everything is stacked against me. And like that is the one like true sign that client was right for me, and I shouldn't have said yes. And that's a hard one, because when you're growing as a business, you want to say yes to all clients.
And if you're not sure of yourself and your art, who's ever sure? If you're hiring Annie Leibovitz to get you a good portrait, great, you're set. I'm sure she's confident. But thinking about imposter syndrome, thinking about, are you good enough? How do you feel about your art? I find in the early stages, everything you just described, I would be on that boat going, ah! Like they're going to think I'm not good enough. They're going to figure out that I'm crap at this and I haven't figured it out. And that to me is a driving force of figure out what you want to do and then try to get hired for it, or just enjoy what you want to do and experiment the rest of the time. So were you panicking because you were afraid of not living up to what your client was going to want? Or were you panicking or frustrated because you're like, what am I doing here? This is useless and I can't do it.
I think I had an ego back then. I still have an ego now, but like I definitely had more of an ego in that regard. And so in my like simpleton's mind at the time, I was like, they set me up for failure. Right? If I'd communicated it early, like when they actually said like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And I could have said, well, do you want me out there photographing that? Because this is, not in my wheelhouse. And I could bring along a second shooter who could do that. And they would be really good at it because they'd be a sports photographer. Like that would be really good. Right. So, but they wanted what they saw in the portfolio, but wanted me to be something completely different. So in my mind, I was like, well, they're bringing in a hammer and then getting angry at the hammer for not being able to screw in a screw. Right now I look back and go, you should have communicated better. Right. So like, I think the first part of being an artist is getting out there and actually convincing people to pay you to do what you do. The second part is developing that customer roster of people who actually trust you to do what you do. And the third part is about communicating correctly, saying like, to get what you want out of this, what you see in my book, we need to do this, right? And it has to be this way because this is where the structure comes in. This is where the control of an artist comes in. I think artists are known for being chaotic and non-controlling, but I think it's because they've lived in environments of lack of control that they make their own rules up around the control. Do you feel that's what you've done, gone from being in this, world of rules where you don't have control over them? So you're stepping out, you're like, you know what, this time I make the rules and they can be whatever the fuck I want them to be.
I'd say to an extent, yeah. That's the enjoyment of that flexibility. So in your analogy, I would have probably gone out there with lenses I don't typically shoot. I would have had longer lenses with me, and I would have been trying to achieve the portfolio look when it was possible and we were close enough. But I'd also be trying to get that sports event stuff that I don't typically shoot. I've gotten better at it now, but I would have still been like, is this good enough? Am I good enough? And trying to achieve those shots that they're looking for, or trying to get as close to my portfolio as I want. Failing to understand that they wanted the event coverage would have been my first mistake. But I think gravitating towards, in any profession, what you want to be and being comfortable to say, this is what I do. And if you want me to do this, I'm willing to try if you are, but here's my limitations and here's what we need to do, or here's what you need to expect as a client. Or, no, this isn't for me. You need to hire somebody else, whatever you feel better at. Yeah.
How do you work through imposter syndrome? Because imposter syndrome comes from not having enough experience, or stacking the odds too much against themselves, right? So I find like that's the two things I found where I start to feel that is where I don't know enough or I haven't done it enough, right? So imposter syndrome has to happen to most people at some point, because if you make any change of any value in your life, you're going to get into it. And so you talk about, they're going to see me as not good enough. Like, are you looking for the applause? Is that what you look for?
Probably worse. I look for not failing, like not getting the critique. I don't crave the positive feedback, but I seem to fear the negative feedback.
You're the first one to ask for it though when we work with you.
Really?
You literally say, give me I want to get some honest feedback, is what you actually say to us.
Because, I don't think it's coming from a self-deprecating place when I ask, even though it may come out that way. I still feel that I have room to improve on even the basics, you know what I mean? And so I want to know that technical side, but then I also want to develop my style and know. One of the better pieces of feedback I got from you was when you sent me out on It was a power washing gig, and these guys were doing these cool old tractors, and I was getting wide angles, which you'd kind of ask for, and get some shots of this, get some shots of that, and I got some wides. And then when we pulled them up in Lightroom and looked at them, you said, "Oh yeah, these are great. These are great." You can go back further. And I thought in my mind, looking through the viewfinder, I'm like, well, these guys are going to be lost in the frame. It was something I hadn't even considered that, hell, I could go even wider. And now it's a scene. We're just getting those little dudes in the front. We don't really care about the details. We're getting the scope of where they are and what they're doing. And that was lost on me. I was thinking e-commerce style. I was thinking, get that detail. And so, sorry, I went for a left turn here, but it's about getting, sorry, Brady, I just bumped that. It's about getting the feedback you want to improve on the technical side and the artistic side. And it's about feeling like you're good enough inside because you feel confident in how you're doing it. I think my confidence is always there. And when it's not subjective or objectively right or wrong, and it's more in the subjective, I'm never going to feel like it's 100% solution. So I'm always looking for that improvement piece.
There's a really fascinating, go a little bit nerdy here. There's a really fascinating episode of Radiolab. I don't know if Radiolab still exists. It was on PBS. And in this episode, they had this reporter go out. And so she went out and she hates driving in traffic. And she goes out and she gets to the location. And so her story that she was covering was on TCDS, which is basically transcranial direct stimulus. It's where they put electrodes on your brain and then just apply a light current to certain parts of your brain. So the concept of this is very simple. Right now, your brain has a certain amount of charge going through it, right? And there's a zero sum. So if you're really good at something, you're really shit at something else, right? And so what TCDS does is it tries to give a bit more juice to the parts of the brain where you wouldn't necessarily have this thing, right? So they took her into a sniper simulation, sat her down, and she went through and she did terribly. She's a civilian going into a sniper situation. Next, they took her into the room and they gave her TCDS and then they put her back out and then she scored very highly, like very highly. And so the concept is that, you know, she could see these things and she was like, it was like playing a video game the second time around. The first time was very stress inducing because they're kind of like making it into a real environment as much as possible. The weird part was when she drove home where she had this clarity of thought and she was driving home and she's like, it was like playing Mario Kart. It was fun and driving was very enjoyable. Like she could see the spaces before they happened. She just like merged. It was just like, it was great. And the other thing she noticed is that her mind was quiet where she, you know, references these angry gnomes of like her inner thoughts talking about herself, telling her she's not good enough, None of that was happening at that point. And so I think that when we start to align ourselves with something that like sets our brain on all cylinders, those little angry gnomes disappear. And when you're forcing your change, when you're going into different parts of your brain to use, that's where those angry gnomes start coming up and being like, you know, and it's like, you know, giving you the negative circle in your brain because they're trying to keep you in the same spot, right? Like that's your brain's job is to try and keep you safe and in as much comfort as possible. So in order to break comfort, you have to go through those angry gnomes. You have to go through those layers. And so, you know, it's, I find it interesting that there is a potential for the brain to have more power to be able to access, to be able to do those things that you wouldn't necessarily be comfortable doing or have competence doing just from simple TCDS. I don't know if you're into brain chemistry and stuff.
Very much.
Right? It's
if
kind
you
of
want to go nerd territory, how much time have you got?
No, let's go. Yeah.
I've one thing that I've learned about, and I'm not going to explain it well in terms of technically how it's supposed to work, but it's like an EMDR technique where you're stimulating both sides of the brain in a physical manifestation. So it can be tapping both sides of your legs, you're stimulating both sides of the brain while you're processing something. And it's a way of reprocessing the way you deal with things. And I find it really fascinating that if done well, you can have a completely different outlook on the way you do things. We're all, how you handle a situation, how you handle stress, you've built pathways in your brain that go, when I have this stimulus coming at me and I need to protect myself, this is how I am going to do it. But when you challenge that and you try to reprocess it differently, now it's like, holy crap, your brain is just, you've got a series of pipes and tubes and plumbing in your house, but how you configure those is up to you. If you want to take them apart and do different things with them, well,
that's up to you.
Yeah. But that is so never thought of, you think about, this is the way I am. This is what I do.
Yep.
I can change my habits, but can I change the way I think about it?
Yes.
And that's the challenge.
It's so cool. So Brady's just picking me going, TDCS is not, so I get it right. Just gonna put it up on the screen. I had a really, TDCS. So I had a really interesting, similar to like the tapping thing. So we're playing games with the kids. I think it was last Friday or the Friday before, playing Yahtzee, right? Easy game to play, right? So now I added in there's like a Spotify playlist of like, they take covers of songs, but they convert them into different kind of like genres.
Okay.
So I did like medieval, but it was like an old like rock songs and stuff like this, right? So we got this medieval music playing, but you got to try and figure out what the song is. And so I started playing the songs for the kids. And I was playing all like Linkin Park and stuff like that, so they knew the songs. And it was like a little sub game of like, tell me what song it is while you're playing Yahtzee. Now here's the interesting part. Yahtzee fell apart. Because the moment they were trying to like add stuff together, but think about what song name it was, they were just short circuiting. All of them were. And it is a great example of where your brain needs to focus on one thing. And like just as simple as adding numbers, right? Which all of them can do well. But then when you add in this layer of like, now tell me what song this is. And they're just like, you could see them like short circuiting. They were going nuts. I'm looking at Trish like, I've never seen my kids do this, right? Because all three, we've got my nephew there too, and they're all like freaking out because their brains are just not functioning the way they expect because they can hear the song, but they're still playing the game. And so it's like it's splitting them. So their brain can't pick a lane. And as a result, just keeps bouncing back and forth. And it was just fascinating seeing someone kind of confusion-wise that way. It's like, you can really reroute people's brains just as simple with music. And that's a fascinating thing to me.
Yeah, I think I've read a little bit about like default mode network and the parts of your brain that are stimulated in different situations. And this is a little off topic, but kind of like fight or flight. When you're triggering certain aspects of your your neural responses, you no longer have access. It's like the older parts of your brain that are designed to keep you alive. Think of a classic fear response. Take a genius level mathematician to the top of a hill who's deathly afraid of heights, and you put him over that tower, and then you ask him a basic math question. Is he even going to be present enough? And it's a bit of an extreme example, but I think that's where I get into that feeling of when you're most lost and you feel the most disconnected. It's probably because the higher parts of your brain, you're not activating at all. You're not present. You're living in fear. You're living in a stress response. And so learning to decode that, I think, can make you better at that kind of multitasking thing, or at least, I don't know, perhaps getting used to living in that and it not being so, okay, I'm feeling this. It doesn't need to be the end of the world. Why am I freaking out? I'm not truly in danger. Take a breath, like just that sort of thing. But I love that concept of multitasking, training two completely unconnected skills at the same time and then trying to perform them both well. It's like, yeah, pack a lunch.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Well, and it's funny because like when I was editing video for Brady, I was listening to music at the same time. And he's like looking at me like, what are you doing, you psycho? Like, how are you able to listen to music and do that at the same time? You remember that?
I stand by this.
So it's just my brain's so able to do that. And like, he would be like locked. He'd be either listening to music or listening to but he couldn't have like whatever TV show I was editing and the music at the same time.
Well, what's weird is I would be able to I could choose where my cut point was for that visual. Let's assume I'm not like beat matching or anything like that. But if you had me like mastering audio levels, not even that the sound is distracting that I'm listening to, but I'm doing something auditory while I'm trying to do something else analytically that's auditory, not a chance. So like even within that, there's a subset. Like my wife is very much the person who, when we get into a city and she doesn't know where we're going, like the radio's off immediately. She's got to concentrate.
Yes.
Where I'm like, let's turn the radio on. It gives me that little, I don't know if that's another ADHD thing rearing its ugly head, but that's going to let me focus on what I'm doing because it's cutting out other things. Like the idea of ADHD medication is taking stimulants. My favorite like silly meme is, it's not very, it's kind of insensitive, but it's like, you're diagnosed with ADHD. So the doctors are like, hey, you have autism light. You should take microdose meth about it. And it's like, holy crap, that is so accurate in a messed up way. But when medication is something new to me, I couldn't believe how many of the things I thought were traumas rearing their ugly head. And I realized, no, it's just ADHD demons not playing well with trauma. And if I can keep them at bay, wow, everything just got easier. My concentration, my motivation. So I needed a stimulant to get the brain moving to avoid defaulting to panic. And I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd love to hear more about this because this is something that I feel like I know people in my life that have... Like, I know people who have stress responses to emails, right? So what you're saying is like, if they're getting into those situations, is actually adding more stimulus can sometimes help. Is that?
Maybe. My understanding is like ADHD medication to the non-ADHD brain is like taking speed. So you have university students who were kind of famously at Ivy League colleges and things where they need to be studying 18, 20 hours a day to be in the 99th percentile or whatever they're trying to achieve, are taking speed or other illicit drugs or Ritalin that's supposed to be a script medication. On their brain, it makes them wild, but on the ADHD brain, it makes it more normal.
Yeah.
Riddle me that.
Yeah. I find that I never have slow thoughts. They're always fast. And that's why... I tend to cut people off in conversations because my brain's already had that conversation. So it's already got to the end. So I have to actively restrain it and be like, wait till the end and then you can add anything. But then it's also trying to hold that question like, oh, I should talk about this. Or, I really love that layer. And I've just come to live with it, right? But it's like seeing my kid is a great example where I can see her jumping in. It's like, slow it down. Take some time. Brady's looking at me like, because like he's constantly like, stop saying yup. Because that's literally one of my responses. It's like, yup, yeah, yep. It's just trying to like hold in the question, right? So
yeah, I think learning that pro-social behavior, that just because I'm thinking fast doesn't mean it's appropriate to interrupt. And I feel that with my wife too, because she's very much not ADHD, and she'll notice my funny little neuroses in that regard. But if she starts telling me a story and I can see the conclusion, it's like, okay, next thing, like move on. Like I'm done. Like I don't want to even finish that sentence and waste that time. I'm like craving the next part or what's the next step. And you realize it's like, it's your own little goofy thing, but nobody else functions that way. So they're going to take it as rude. Like, why are you interrupting me? Why are you forcing me? And so that's something, you learn through life and you just learn to cope with. But I think leaning into it where appropriate can be like the superpower. I can do these things fast. And you ever been in a situation where you've procrastinated something and now I don't really have enough time to do justice to what I want to get done. I've got an hour and this job takes 2, but that hour, man, you're going to crush more than you would in 8 hours if you had no deadline. And it's like, there's just something about activating that.
Yeah. It's like that. There's a meme literally about it. It's like, 8-hour project or 10-hour project, ADHDers the hour before. I got this. It's like, that's like and I feel like the art and the creative world tends to attract ADHD because, how do I put this? There's discipline in the creativity, but it's not necessarily a cage. But often doing your more traditional work, the discipline can feel like a cage.
Can you explain how there's discipline and creativity? What do you mean by that?
I think the discipline and creativity is like especially if as you create, you start to form concepts of what you like. And like I talked about before, it's like, here are my 3 rules for photography, right? Like you start to build that discipline through that. And that is because of your creativity, you've built this kind of, like structure for yourself, right? Like the discipline of like, this is how I do it, right? When it's someone else's structure, I struggle. But when I create it for myself, I mean, it could be the worst structure ever. right? Like anybody who works, and is an entrepreneur has been sold the lie that you get to work half days, right? And then I joke, it's like, yeah, you get to work half days. You work 8 to 8 or 8 to 8. Which one, right? It's like, that's your half day, And that to me is like, I think that's the ADHD special. It's like convincing yourself that, this discipline is actually better than the discipline that was going to be if I stayed there.
It's not easier though. So it's
no, I'm not saying it's easier.
Oh no, I agree. That's why I think so many can default into, like, case in point, is it easier to just go to your job where you didn't have to think about what's happening today? You show up and you're told what's happening today and you just do it. There can be a comfort in a fixed mindset rather than a growth mindset of, I'm just going to come in, I'm just going to do my job, and I'm going to get paid. Mm-hmm. Whereas now you've got to drive that bus and you've got to drive. That's why I asked about the discipline, because I'm like, well, how do you do that? And again, another right turn here I want to create, and I've learned these techniques and I've studied them, whether it be talking to a fellow creator, somebody who's doing something that I haven't seen before, or just watching like a YouTube idea and getting an inspiration. I've got this free time. I've got nothing going on today and I'm at home. My wife's at work. Here's my camera right in front of me sitting on the table, and it's sitting and it's sitting and it's sitting. But then the anxiety of getting started on a task can overwhelm me and I do absolutely nothing. I don't sit and watch other videos. I don't sit and do it. Like, I sit and do nothing. So how do you break into that creativity? Is that a habit for you, or do you feel compelled to experiment when you're starting out?
Have you ever run?
Yeah.
Did you do a lot of running?
Yeah, not like marathon type training, but training for.
What was your longest distance?
Oh, probably 13K.
13K.
Yeah.
Could you do 0 to 13K in one day?
No, of course not. You have a workup training program.
Yeah.
But what if you are the one overseeing that?
I think for me, so running taught me, if I want to go somewhere, I can't just do it. Right? So have I told you the running story? The beginning, right? So the genesis of me running was I felt like I was out of shape, but I mean, I don't really gain a ton of weight. I gain like 10, 15 pounds and then just hold it there, right? So I was like, okay, I want to actually go and work out. And I'm going to go running because it's easy, because all you have to do is buy a pair of shoes, right? So I took my brother-in-law out and we went running, and he's 10 years older than me, but he's like, yeah, I've got to get going too. So this sounds like a great time to start getting fit. We ran, and I think I ran maybe 400 meters, and then I was completely out. We ran a massive 1.6 kilometer run that day, and I almost puked. Got back, and I said to everyone, I'm like, I'm going to run a marathon. And they're like, haha, yeah, okay. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. I'm going to get to the point where I can run a marathon. And they're like, how far is a marathon? So then I had to Google how far a marathon was. And at that point, I realized 42.2 kilometers, or I can't even remember. I think it's like 20 miles or something like that. It's a long, long way. And so I ended up saying, okay, well, I'll do a half marathon, which is a 21.1 kilometer. And then during that next year, I spent the time really focusing on getting better at running. I struggled to get to 5 kilometers to start. And then I struggled to get to 8. I remember when I saw 8 on my training schedule, I was like, no fucking way. Like, I'm not going to be able to do this. And so I just like got up in the morning. I'm like, hit 5. And then you can say you've done it. And then walk the rest. And so I started going and going and going, and actually just forcing myself to go through it, and pushed myself too far. And it was like every Sunday, it was like the kilometers just getting higher and higher. And I was like, I just can't do it. I can't do it. And then I would just push myself way too far. And then those normal days became easier. Mm-hmm. So I got to the point where when I was marathon training, where my average kilometers per day was 16 kilometers a day. Mm-hmm. And I just go out, run, and a 16 was a nice run for me. And I look back at that and go, in order to do the big things, you have to have first the goal of the big thing, and it has to be a strong enough goal, right? Because no amount of people who don't want to run 21.1 or 42.2 kilometers are going to run that if they don't really want to. So there has to be that, I really want this first, that drive, that passion. And then from there, you just need that discipline to keep up and going and doing it. So I think when it comes to picking up the camera, just force yourself to pick up the camera and do something. And more often than not, do 2 or 3 minutes of it, and you'll be like, oh, you know what? Might as well film this one doing it, right? And you force yourself into actually the action. And I think that's the part that's lacking with a lot of creators too, is they sit there and say, well, I have nothing to shoot. It's like, okay, then just go out and shoot nothing. Pick up the camera, get really good with the camera. I picked up the camera last year and I had trouble remembering where stuff was. And that's when I realized that I hadn't shot enough. And I was like, okay. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's something that I'm moving away from, because this is a new phase for me. It's very similar to how you moved away from, the military into a creative realm. I'm moving away into more of a creative agency, and I don't need to be the one with the hands on the camera anymore. It sometimes is hard, but it's getting easier and easier, and seeing the team do amazing work, right? And so I'm confident in that. But I think just over time, the goals change.
So the discipline factor was for you just continuing at it, even if you don't exceed, you don't push that extra 1% or 5 or 10%.
Yep.
Just keeping at it for you.
Yeah, I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking to do the thing for doing the thing's sake. I'm looking to get to that goal. In order to get to that goal, I've got to push through, the layers of, I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore. This sucks. But that's just normal. That's the price of entry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the day where you're looking at your shoes and it's the time and you don't want to put them on? What then?
I usually force myself by saying I'll just do 2 minutes. No, I'm serious. Yeah. Just do 2 minutes. If you can do 2 minutes of it, then you're off, right? I'm going into doing the push-up challenge in February. And I know dang well, because I've done this for 3 years in a row now, I know how it feels. And it's like, just do 2 push-ups. And then when you're at 2, then you're like, I'll just do 3. Do
I'm
4.
already down here.
I might as well do 20, right? So, and it's just like, it's more often than not just physically doing it that's going to motivate you into doing it. Like, because if you're on the treadmill and you're walking, well, you might as well run. I'm here, might as well run, right? The other trick you can do, and this is from Atomic Habits, is force yourself 5 minutes.
Yep.
That's it. You're not allowed to write anymore. You're not allowed to photograph anymore. You're like, only 5 minutes. So you have to start, but then you can only do that and get to the point where you yearn to go beyond that. And then that's when you build that discipline. Yeah.
Yeah. I do the 5 minutes. It's how I got through school. Actually, it was just, this project's due next week. I'm not going to leave it to the last day for once. So I tell myself, but yeah, getting into that, I'm just going to do my outline right. I'm going to take 5 minutes to organize my sections and how I want to lay this out.
Yep.
And then if you can do that, you're probably going to work half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever it be, and you surprise yourself. So for you would take your shoes, do your 2 minutes.
Yep.
Did you ever stop ever once at the 2 minutes and just said, not feeling it today? Or were you just like, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay though. It's tomorrow.
Yep. It's still progress.
It's something, right? Like, people they misuse something so much, because something is something. It'll get you to where you want to go. And it's the accumulations of a little bunch of somethings that make up the difference. Because eventually you'll just get tired of just doing 2 minutes. And you'll be like, oh, I'll do 5. Right? So for doing distance, you have no choice. Like, that's the other thing too, is you're kind of getting dragged along. It's like, if I don't run 8 kilometers this weekend, next weekend I have 10. And the weekend after I have 12. And the weekend after I have 15. And the weekend after I have 20. So it's like, if you don't, that next week gets worse. And so it's kind of like knowing that, we talk about stress piling up and getting harder and harder. It'll be the same thing. So yeah, it's kind of avoiding the pancake effect. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing how you can see the philosophy behind it. You can see the logic behind it. But when it comes to the moment, I find for me, that's the struggle when I ask people, when you just feel so stuck and everybody has their methodology behind it. But some days it's like you're hitting that gas pedal.
Yeah.
But why is it not connected to anything,
It's interesting to me how you've gone through a lot of different changes, right? And you went back through school. Like, what was the school experience like for someone who has a vast experience in life already?
Yeah, it was definitely, going back to school older is always unique, especially because I was going into, I guess, a field that I'm not educated. So I felt very on par with my peers in terms of subject matter, but you can't help but be aware that your soft skills are at a different point. You already have professional rapport, communication. You know how to write an email to someone professionally. You know how to deal with a professor, or to not be intimidated speaking in front of people, perhaps if you have that affliction. But yeah, and being someone who spent time teaching in a technical school too, there were times that you could see read between the lines with what they're teaching you and what they want. And you're like, okay, this is what they want from me. Can I skip to the next step? And trying to keep at bay that thing we talked about I need more information fast, because if I can see where this is going, I want to jump to the next point. So I really just kept myself going through the motions that they were asking me to go through, because I was trying to respect the value in the structure of the program. They teach you sometimes in a particular order because they need you to master one thing before they teach the next. But conversely, working with younger people and seeing a little bit of a shift in the generational gap, the technology gap, what they're comfortable with, what they're not, kind of uniformly, was really cool. And it, in some ways, it keeps you young. I kind of love hanging out with people younger than myself. And out of that school experience, I've actually got some really great friends, a couple I keep in touch with very much. And we challenge each other on, am I being an old guy? Am I being like my parents? And am I seeing things that are not relevant? Am I failing to be flexible and being stuck in an old methodology of thinking? So there was a bit of that, but from the pure educational aspect, it was quite gratifying to just, I am a student, to be able to say that again and just think that way. And that is my job right now. I'm not setting out to do anything but learn.
Yeah.
And that was freeing as all hell.
Must have been nice after being the person that was the kind of the funnel for all the information. Mm-hmm. Right. So suddenly you're on the other side, you're like, I don't have to say that, or I don't have to keep you in line. I can just like be here and exist and find, a new purpose, right? As you're kind of like developing a new purpose. So
yeah, that's the goal towards the future. Is I've done the education. Education never stops, as you know. There are still things that I want to do both formally and informally, and most of my free time, if I'm just wasting time watching YouTube, it's on a new technique or something I want to know. And that's the exciting part of the journey, is change doesn't stop. And just because we are feeling like we've completed a change, we're always evolving to something new. And I think that's the exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap that with Winston Churchill's quote that I pulled for this particular moment is, to improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often.
I love that.
Adam, thank you.
Thank you.